Hi guys, it's Heatherine again. I'm a little sick, so you have to excuse the voice. I think finals week has finally got to me. Um, oh, I can't believe it's our last discussion, but I have to say I've really enjoyed the videos. I guess I'm really excited to kind of get into chapter 16 and 17. They kind of hit home for me, especially with my crisis intervention background. Um, let's start with first. What is family recovery? Um, in my own words, family recovery is it's not just about one person healing from addiction or trauma. It's about the entire family system adapting, understanding, growing together. One person struggles with addiction, and the ripple, as I've talked about before, it touches everyone. So recovery becomes this shared perspective and need. Well, recovery is not a one size fits all process. And I think that if we look at really when a person struggles, with addiction, when their family struggles with that person's struggle, because that's what we know. We know that all of these ripples are an offshoot from everyone struggling to cope with the same issue, and that's the addiction and the behaviors that result from it, right? So recovery is really becoming the shared process where the roles are redefined, communication is improved, trust is rebuilt. There's nothing linear about it, which is I think what I really like about MDFT and oh I just went right out of my head. We'll just go with MDFT, but I also like oh I think it's SFBT. It just went right out of my head. Sorry, like I said, I'm sick, brain's a little foggy. Anyway, moving forward because I know we're only doing 10 minutes this time. I promise, guys, my Zoom is working this week. Anyway, but like I said, it's not linear. It's not perfect. It's messy, but it's collaborative, and it's a collaboration that makes it so vital, so critical in that recovery process. I think I just mentioned this before, but recovery is it's not a one size fits all process. And when we view families through different lenses, like nuclear or single parents, blended, chosen family, friends, like I've mentioned before with my best friend, my personal issues, but we begin to see that recovery it is it is an all-encompassing process. And the recovery process, it may involve, more role strain and emotional labor, even emotional inconsistency, behavioral inconsistency, especially while in like blended families. I just say that because of my own, but boundaries and roles may need more intentional navigation. Um, you can you can say that tailoring recovery strategies based on family type. I mean, I take that back. You want to tailor recovery strategies based on family types, the same way that you want to tailor interventions based on client needs. I think those two are very congruent and parallel ideals, especially from a provider perspective. Um, I think I like this third question a lot. If I was going to pursue the LADC route, um, I could definitely see why this question is important, and can relapse be positive? And absolutely, 100%. I can believe that relapse can be viewed as a constructive part of recovery, maybe even a necessary one. Because if you never mess up, you always have that stress of, not messing up. Once somebody has relapsed, there's that, and they've come back from it. They know that they've done they've done the worst. They've hit rock bottom. They have broken the recovery, but they have come back from that, that it is possible, that they don't need to lose hope. And that is an important motivator, I think, for a lot of people experiencing issues with drug addiction and families that are going through, HE double hockey sticks, for multitudes of reasons, role reversals, role strains, financial strains, emotional constraints, um, you know, the depravity that's involved with some behaviors. Uh, I would say that given my background, I've seen firsthand how relapse often reveals hidden triggers, systemic issues, gaps in support, a lack of a network, a lack of support. When handled the correct way with care and reflection, relapses can be a wake-up call. They can drive deeper commitment and understanding. They can motivate hope. I don't know if you guys have uh, been introduced or are familiar with the book Hope as a Science, but I don't necessarily agree with all the ideals in it. I don't necessarily believe that hope is not an emotion, but I do believe that it can be measured in a scientific fashion. Um, and I also think that it is a pivotal and critical necessity when you're on the road to recovery. So during relapse, you have to be able to nurture hope. You have to be able to encourage it. You have to be able to help a person find it. Um, and that's not just the individual struggling with addiction or the relapse. That's the family that's struggling within that network, if there is one. Um, I always do this. Strategies. Um, so strategies for enhancing family recovery, there's several. I think the ones I really want to focus on are ones that, shocking family psychoeducation, given what my future plans are. And that consists of providing knowledge that reduces stigma and builds empathy. Therapeutic boundary setting, that's a big one, especially from a provider perspective. I think I was talking about maintaining your boundaries on the last one, so I guess I'm being consistent. Yay me. Helping each member of that family or that system understand and practice healthy limits, incorporating rituals of reconnection, um, like we'll say for my family, we did family meetings. My mom still does check-ins. We can emphasize unity by giving everyone a voice and letting them know that you're present and accounted for within that family network. From a provider perspective, you can rebuild rapport and trust and even hope by helping strengthen that concept of building unity and giving each person a voice and encouraging each person to use that voice. These strategies really shift the narrative from blame to shared responsibility and resilience. Um, Somehow I hear myself echoing. It's almost like deja vu. So I'm sorry if you watched my last few, I probably sound pretty repetitive. Then you have, oh, the next, okay. Just to differentiate, because I know that Professor Adams has said to that. So now we're into chapter 17, self of a therapist. And I actually I almost wish we would have posted them, but I actually shared this concept in my meeting assignment because I actually came to terms with if you don't have empathy because you don't have experience, you only have sympathy, how can you be a good provider? And this is something that I legitimately have struggled with myself many times. And I still struggle with that, to be honest. I literally still struggle with this. So if we're focusing on, oh my gosh, I just lost it. I'm so sorry, guys. Simon's five philosophical dimensions. Um, Honestly, obviously Simon's model really resonated with me because as I've said, I've really struggled with that question for myself. I find myself falling on the side of um freedom versus determinism. I, of course, being me, I lean toward freedom. I know anybody who knows me is probably chuckling at that right now. I believe that people are capable of change even after trauma or addiction. I've seen it. I am it, to be honest. Not the addiction part per se, but I have trauma via addiction. And so I've seen it, and I can say for my children's father that he's come a long way. And I commend him for that. I really do. So both of us have really remolded ourselves, reinvented ourselves. We have both changed. And I really need to like move this little video so I stop looking at it. Like, sorry guys. Um my kids, sorry. Facebook Messenger popping up. Anyway, so where's like a freedom versus determinism. Sorry, I like my verses. I'm real big on that. I like to compare and contrast, I think. So if I was gonna do the next one, it'd be rationality versus irrationality. Rationality speaks to me because from a provider perspective, we can use insight and awareness to reframe destructive behaviors, traumatic uh, impacts, and addictive routine. I probably have a little more irrational tendencies, which is probably why, if I break it down, rationality speaks to me in the way that it does. I'm sorry, I'm losing my voice, guys. Okay, so I better hurry this up. So, the next one, uh, it's proactivity versus reactivity. Now, definitely I lean toward proactivity, of course, 100%. I think you have to if you're going to be in this field. I've learned to take initiative in understanding my responses, both as a person and a professional. That means that I have had to really step up and take accountability for myself, my actions, my self-awareness or lack thereof, and which is probably why I am so honest, so upfront, and so forthcoming about my experiences in our discussions throughout the spectrum of my classes, because that really pushed an introspective approach to my learning. And in that introspective approach, I really started to regain my self-awareness. And I can say that although I've always felt myself self-aware, I think there's a layer to us that will sink into denial, especially after trauma or struggle, um, any kind of deflection when we get into survival mode. And it took me a minute, even coming into this program, even after being in a field, in the psychology field for 15 plus years. There have been many times where it's been stop and start, where I've been self-aware, and then I go into survival mode or deflection mode, and I lose that proactivity to keep my self-awareness. And so the importance of that is really underscored when you're reading through um, all of the books I think we touched on, but especially this particular book. And I wasn't very, I didn't enjoy this book in the beginning. I thought it was written in a defeating manner. It was really very geared toward regurgitation, and I'm not a fan of regurgitation. I don't think that's learning. I think that's memorization. Um, which leads me kind of into the next, it actually just reminded me like, hey, you're in a discussion, but into changeability versus unchangeability. Of course, I sit with changeability. I think that really leans toward the rationality and proactivity and freedom, because you want the freedom to change. You want to proactively pursue, you want to be proactive in your pursuit to change. And that is really the only rational choice. Um, I know I'm probably up here to be justifying this, but for me, this is just connecting concepts. I've witnessed growth in clients and myself and my family. People are not stuck, and that's key. From a provider perspective, we are not stuck in our trauma. We are not stuck in this job. We choose to be there. We are not stuck in our flaws. We are not stuck by the negative uh, opinions of others when it relates to us. We are not held there. We can be free from that, and people can change. our clients can change. If we don't believe that we are capable of change, we can never really fully believe that clients are. And that is doing them a disservice to sit in that room if you have already set a preconceived notion that change is not applicable or possible. I think the last one, objectivity versus subjectivity, that's a huge one for me. And I think a lot of people, the line blurs. It blurs for me. I'm not saying it doesn't, it absolutely does. But in my pursuit of my own self-awareness, I have made active changes, conscious changes to make this, I've made active changes to really try to land on the side of objectivity. And that is so hard. And when you really start to think about it and incorporate it in your life, you start to realize how hard it was. I always considered myself an objective person. And there are many times I catch myself and think, wow, that was judgmental. That was subjective. That is not necessarily what everyone sees. That is what you see in relation to your experiences and how it's processed from your perspective. To say I wrestle here would be an understatement, if I'm being honest. I strive for objectivity in all things. I recognize how, like I said, my experiences kind of shape my lens, and I think that's really where mindfulness and keeping the concept that people can change in your mind at the forefront, especially from a provider perspective, becomes so critical. Um, I think I think that's something that we all really just need to tuck away in our little jacket pocket so that we can remind ourselves that objectivity is the goal, and most of the time, subjectivity is the reality. Okay, clock's ticking, Hillary. Where is the line with self-disclosure? Just forgot what I had prepared. Sorry, guys. I try to like write out all my thoughts so I can gear them out and I'm not like everywhere for 20 minutes. I'm really trying to limit this. So, where's the line with self-disclosure? I'll wing it until I remember what I was going to say. For me, the line is kind of drawn at whether my disclosure serves the client's growth or my own validation. That is key. Uh, I have to ask myself, um, especially when I was in crisis intervention, and this this coined phrase used to appear all the time, especially with some of my coworkers, and that was trauma bonding. And I was terrified of doing that. I did not want a trauma bond. I won't say I didn't. There weren't any times I recognized, which actually kind of scares me. But many of my coworkers would assure me that I was very fluid in my responses, but I did not, I was supportive, but not necessarily uh trauma bonding. And I think that you have to ask yourself, is this about them or is this about me? And especially in addiction work, from my limited experience through crisis intervention, self-disclosure can humanize yourself and the space that you are bringing them into to help be a safe space. But it has to be intentional, it has to be brief, and it has to be centered toward client benefit. Um, that is paramount, and a lot of people, that is an easily blurred line. I really would always try and stay away from it, to be quite frank. Um, why is, oh my gosh, what is the next question? Come on, I could do this. I could do a 10-minute discussion, guys, I promise. Why is it important to focus? Oh, okay. No. Why is it important to focus on the self? I think it's on the self of therapist. Um, and this is kind of like and addiction counseling. Why is it important to focus on the sense of self or the self of therapist in addiction counseling? Sorry. Anyway, this is again something I had talked about in my meeting assignment, and it's essential because our presence our presence, our future professional presence is the intervention. And there are multiple interventions. Like it's not a straight line, it's not linear. Like anything in therapy, pretty much nothing is linear. In addiction counseling, transference and countertransference, trauma bonding can show up hard and fast. Um, if you're not aware of your own history, like for me, if I'm not aware of my own history, my own triggers, my own biases can interject themselves into my presence as a provider and thus my perspective and thus interfere with or influence, that's probably better, influence the decisions I make regarding interventions, treatment plans, and just interaction in general. I risk, we risk projecting or rescuing, doing our own work, doing my own inner work. Like I really try to hear in every lesson, in every discussion, in every assignment, it creates a safer and more ethical space for the client when I enter the field. Um, that's tantamount. Growing up in a family that's in this field, I can't explain to you the really come full circle. It's the irony. If y'all knew my mom, you would understand that. But there are just some things that I look back at and I see totally different because I am objective and I pull myself back. I have a sense of self and I now think of things in, and that's why I use it now because it's a reminder for me of the provider perspective. I think that is so important because otherwise you really can fall victim. Someone, especially with like me, who has as much trauma and personal experience, the depth of dark places that my children and I have been, we really are at risk for transference and countertransference, trauma bonding. That's why I'm just terrified of that when I was working in the crisis intervention field. Okay, enough of that. I'm not gonna, no tangents today. Um, I think the last one was we were doing pros and cons of relating to the client's experience or um, basically true empathy, knowing the type of experience a client has or is currently having because we ourselves have been in a similar situation. I'll never say the same because we're all individuals, but that shared experience, it can create, as I mentioned, it can create true empathy, where clients can feel seen, they can feel understood, they can really lay down the trust because they don't feel judged. Possibly, of course, that's always an assumption. It gives the provider, gives me credibility to have that lived experience, and it gives me some authenticity, and it allows the client to place some trust in me because of that authenticity and that credibility. Um, as a PRSS, I don't know if you guys know what that is, but that's a peer recovery support specialist. You have to, I call it testifying, um, but you have to share uh, your experience, whether that's an addiction, whether that's trauma or whatnot. Being a vet and having PTSD, you share what it is before you have to share it with the group that you're coming in and being certified with, so that A, you know what it feels like, so you can remember what it feels like when that client shares with you. And so that also you hopefully in that process can uncover, identify any triggers, any biases, anything that you might reach at a certain level. And for me, as a PRSS, I was actually complimented on this. But I've never had an addiction issue. I've lived with an addict, several actually, but I don't have any myself, never have, probably because of my bio mom and my ex. And so in that, when I was serving as a PRSS, I would always be like, listen, I'm here. I'm an open book. I am here to listen to you. But if it makes you feel uncomfortable, because I have to be honest, I don't have a shared experience in that countenance. I can refer you to someone who does, and I would. And there were so many people that would come back and thank me, or on occasion would tell my boss, like, I really appreciated that. Like, she listened to me, but she pushed me in the direction of someone who I felt, from my experience, would relate to me better. And later, when those PRSs either had moved or were unavailable, they had no problem coming to me because they understood that I would be honest enough, I was honest enough, had been honest enough to share with them that I may not be the best PRSS for them on a continual basis. So in that, I actually built some credibility and some trust in myself in realms outside of shared experience. Now, for me, that also was, there's there's pros and cons here, because that served as uh both a pro for me and a con for me, as that meant that a lot of people would return the favor and send people who had trauma, severe trauma, like I did, they would refer them back to me. And in that, like I said, I was super terrified of trauma bonding. Um, I know that I'm a high risk for it, and I really wonder sometimes how I never could have. And to me, I don't believe that I have, and I just believe I didn't recognize myself doing it. Again, makes it more terrifying for me, but that brings me to the cons. You have over identification, which is like making assumptions or seeing those people in my narrative, or seeing myself in their narrative, but basically approaching it and holding the standards that I would expect from myself. So I would be projecting myself and my own expectations of myself onto them. And then you have the boundary blur, where, the therapeutic focus can shift from healing to my story. And I don't want to do that. And I kind of mentioned that in my meeting assignment too, you run this risk of, if I don't have that experience, can I possibly have empathy? Which the answer is yes. And that's a whole thing. I won't go there, but the answer is yes. And if you're curious about that, please look it up if you struggle with it, because uh I really gained a lot of insight, clarity, and peace of mind from that assignment. So thank you, Professor. Uh and on the back burner, basically, um or the opposite, on the other side of the scale, essentially, you have the projecting of yourself too much, because you over identify with that situation to the point where it overtakes you, and then it takes away your possibility to provide a healing and mentoring identity or treatment. I think I already went on a tangent, but that was just a deep place for me. Like, that question really, it's something that I really focused on many times. Um, so these chapters, really, everyone we've had has been really interconnected. This discussion particularly kind of reminds me, because I think I've referenced both of my previous discussions in this one, but how interconnected our theory, the family systems, therapists' sense of self is. And when we're navigating relapse, we need to show compassion. When we're owning our own philosophical stance or psychological health, I'll put it that way. The work is both clinical and deeply personal. We need to keep mind of that. Oh, sorry, guys. Thanks for watching. I look forward to hearing your perspectives as always. You have been a great class, and I look forward to seeing you guys again. I'll see you on the flip side. Some hilarious combinations. If I can ever turn this off. Just kidding. Okay.